Play one perfectly quantized MIDI phrase in your head. The pitch is right. The timing is right. Every note arrives exactly where the grid expects it, but the sound sits there like a diagram. Now keep those same notes and let the instrument move. The filter opens into the phrase. The level rises toward the important chord. A little modulation becomes wider in the chorus. An expression curve gives the held notes a beginning, a peak, and a release. Nothing about the harmony changed, yet the part now feels performed. That invisible performance is automation, a parameter changing over time. It can be drawn, recorded from a controller, generated by modulation, or coordinated through a macro. The point is not to make every knob move. The point is to turn the arrangement's intention into motion. In this video, we will build that motion with 10 practical techniques. We will isolate parameters, shape filters, use LFO modulation, ride level, write MIDI expression, create stereo motion, build macros, draw better curves, change automation between sections, and bypass everything that does not help. Automation in music production is not decoration. Used well, it is how a programmed part learns to breathe. Tip 1. Automate one parameter at a time. Open a synth patch and you may see dozens of destinations: cutoff, resonance, detune, drive, volume, pan, reverb send, delay feedback, and modulation depth. If 5 of them move at once, the result may sound exciting, but you cannot tell which change created the useful part. Start with the parameter that carries the clearest musical job. If the sound needs to grow brighter, choose cutoff. If it needs to approach the listener, choose level or ambience. Draw one move, loop the phrase, and bypass that lane. Can you describe what it contributes in one sentence? Then add a second layer. Perhaps cutoff creates the long build, while a smaller level ride shapes each chord. Listen again. This pass-by-pass method gives you clarity and makes revisions much faster. The rule is a diagnostic method, not a ban on complexity. Later, a macro may deliberately coordinate several destinations, but you should understand the ingredients before combining them. When automation feels chaotic, mute every lane and restore them one by one. The goal is not the highest lane count. It is one focused movement, followed by another, until the part says exactly what the arrangement needs. Tip 2. Use filter automation to shape movement. A sustained pad can hold the same chord for several bars and still develop if its tone changes. Start with the filter relatively closed, then open the cutoff as the section builds. Over 8 or 16 bars, that movement can create tension without adding a new note. Reverse the gesture, and the sound can recede or make room for the next section. Do not assume one curve shape is always natural. A straight ramp creates steady change in the automation lane, but the filter may not sound equally dramatic across its entire range. An eased curve can keep the opening subtle, then reveal more brightness near the end. A shorter rise and fall can make each phrase inhale and exhale. Set the start and end points by ear. If the beginning becomes dull and loses its identity, raise the minimum. If the peak becomes harsh, lower the maximum or reduce resonance. Then listen in the mix, because cymbals, vocals, and other bright parts change how much filter movement you need. The filter is powerful because it changes both energy and color. Use it to participate in the song's emotional arc, not simply because an empty automation lane looks unfinished. Tip 3. Treat every LFO as repeating automation. An LFO moves a parameter in a cycle. On filter cutoff, it can create a pulse. On pitch, it can create vibrato. On amplitude, it creates tremolo. On pan, it can send a texture back and forth through the stereo field. If the movement should lock to the groove, choose a tempo-synchronized rate, such as a quarter note or an eighth note. Listen to where each cycle lands against the kick, snare, and chord rhythm. A free running rate can also work when you want a less predictable drift. The musical choice comes first. Synchronization is a tool, not a requirement. The deeper move is to automate the LFO itself. Keep the depth restrained in the verse, then increase it in the chorus. Slow the rate during a sustained phrase, then accelerate it into a transition. Now the repeating motion has an arrangement. Be careful with pitch and amplitude depth. A small amount can add life, a large amount becomes a special effect. Start near 0, raise the depth until the movement is clear, then pull it back slightly. An LFO saves you from drawing every cycle. Automation tells that cycle when to become calm, active, narrow, or wide. Tip 4. Use volume automation as part of the arrangement. Imagine the same MIDI chord repeating 4 times at exactly the same level. The notes may be correct, but the phrase has no destination. Now let each repetition rise a little, then let the final chord settle. That simple ride creates direction. Work at 2 scales. First, shape sections. The first chorus can be more restrained, the second can arrive with more level, and the final chorus can reach the strongest point if the song supports that build. The source gives -12, -8, and -5 decibels as an example, but those numbers are not a recipe. Your gain staging decides the actual values. Second, shape the phrase. Raise an entrance that needs emphasis, tuck a sustain that masks the vocal, and recover the tail when space opens again. Use the track fader for track-level rides. For individual MIDI notes, use velocity or per-note expression when the instrument supports it. One track volume lane cannot independently reshape notes that overlap. Keep enough headroom for the mix and compare at a sensible listening level. Volume automation is not only correction, it is a way to make repetition feel intentional and to connect the MIDI part to the energy of the arrangement. Tip 5. Use MIDI expression controllers with the instrument's actual mapping. Many orchestral libraries, pads, and expressive instruments respond to continuous controller data. CC11 is conventionally expression. CC1 is conventionally the modulation wheel, and many libraries map it to dynamics or timbre. CC7 is channel volume. The exact behavior can vary, so check the library's documentation before drawing lanes. For a held string chord, begin with a gentle rise. Let the sound swell toward the musical peak, hold briefly, then release rather than dropping vertically. Give each phrase its own arc. The shape should follow the musical sentence, not repeat mechanically every bar. When a library uses CC1 for dynamics and CC11 for expression, they can work together. One controller may change sample layers or brightness, while the other trims the phrase level. Make one move at a time so you can hear their separate jobs. Do not max out every swell. Real expression depends on contrast. A quiet phrase needs room to remain quiet, and a climax needs somewhere to go. Velocity can define the note's initial attack, while continuous controllers shape what happens after the note begins. That combination is often the difference between a held MIDI note and a phrase that feels like it was actually played. Tip 6. Use pan automation to create selective stereo motion. Not every element should travel. Keep the kick, bass, lead vocal, and other important anchors stable unless the arrangement asks for a deliberate effect. Then choose a pad, texture, noise layer, or delay return that can move without pulling the song's center apart. Start with a slow journey across 8, 16, or even 32 bars. The listener may not point to the pan lane, but the texture stops feeling parked. For more rhythmic energy, a synchronized pan movement can answer the beat. Keep the range narrower than full left to full right until you know the extreme is useful. Avoid symmetrical autopilot. A small move from 20% left to 35% right can feel more organic than an identical sweep between the edges. You can also pause the motion at the end of a phrase so the sound arrives somewhere. Then check the mix in mono. Panning itself does not automatically create phase cancellation, but stereo effects, duplicated layers, and modulation may change when the channels are summed. Make sure the sound remains useful. Stereo motion works best when it has a role: atmosphere, transition, call and response, or controlled excitement. If the listener's attention keeps chasing the sound, reduce the range or slow it down. Tip 7. Build a macro for coordinated movement. A macro is one control mapped to several destinations. An energy macro might open the filter, add a little saturation, increase modulation depth, and raise a reverb send. Instead of editing 4 unrelated lanes, you automate one clear gesture. The quality of the result depends on the mapping. Set a safe minimum and maximum for every destination. The filter may need a wide range, while resonance needs only a small rise. Reverb may increase as the sound grows, or decrease if you want the sound to move forward. Each parameter can travel in a different amount or direction. Name the macro by intention: energy, distance, tension, width, or decay. If you cannot name the idea, the mapping may be a collection of tricks rather than one musical control. Record the macro from a hardware knob if you want a hand-shaped gesture, or draw the lane if you need precise timing. Then reopen the mapped parameters and confirm that none of them reaches an ugly or unstable value. This technique does not contradict the one-parameter rule. First, learn what each destination contributes, then combine them on purpose. A good macro makes complex automation easier to perform, easier to revise, and easier to repeat across a section. Tip 8. Draw automation curves by hand. The default line between 2 points is only one possible phrase. A linear ramp can be exactly right when you want steady change. An eased curve can delay the obvious movement, then accelerate into the destination. A stepped shape can create rhythmic jumps. A recorded knob gesture can add natural irregularity. Choose the shape by listening to the parameter, not by admiring the lane. Different controls respond differently. Halfway up a cutoff lane may not sound halfway bright. Halfway up a reverb send may already feel distant. Place breakpoints where your ear hears a structural moment. Keep the curve simple enough to edit. Dense controller data from a hardware performance can contain tiny movements that add no value and make later changes painful. If your DAW offers thinning or smoothing, use it carefully, then compare the result to the original gesture. Zoom out and check the phrase. Does the curve begin before the musical build? Does it peak with the important note? Does it release in time for the next idea? Drawing by hand is not about rejecting recorded automation. It is about taking responsibility for the final shape. Every point should help timing, tone, depth, or energy. If deleting 3 points sounds the same, keep the simpler curve. Tip 9. Automate your own automation. A song changes by section, so the amount of movement should change too. If the verse, pre-chorus, and chorus all use the same filter sweep, the same LFO depth, and the same pan range, the automation becomes another loop. Create a hierarchy. In the verse, keep the filter movement narrow and the modulation shallow. During the pre-chorus, lengthen the sweep or increase the rate. In the chorus, widen the macro range or let the expression arc reach a stronger peak. Then reduce the motion again so the next build has contrast. You can also automate transition behavior, increase delay feedback for the last word of a phrase, accelerate an LFO into the downbeat, or open a filter during the final bar. Return the parameter deliberately after the transition so the effect does not leak into the new section. Think in nested layers. The LFO creates repeating motion. One automation lane changes its depth. The section arrangement decides when that lane expands or relaxes. This is how a static patch becomes a developing performance. The sound does not merely move. The character of its movement changes as the song changes. Automation gains form, and form is what turns motion into musical storytelling. Tip 10. Bypass automation regularly and subtract what does not help. When you have stared at curves for an hour, movement can feel important simply because you drew it. Close the lane and listen, then disable one automation pass at a time. Does the filter lose direction? Does the phrase become flat? Does the chorus shrink? If nothing meaningful changes, that lane may not be earning its place. Next, bypass the entire automation pass. The automated version does not need to sound obviously busier. Some of the best movement is felt as phrasing rather than heard as an effect. The question is whether the track loses life, clarity, or direction when the automation disappears. Watch for competing gestures. A rising filter, widening pan, increasing reverb, louder level, and faster vibrato may all point toward growth, but together they can blur the focal point. Keep the one or two moves that communicate the idea most clearly. Tone down automation that distracts from the vocal, weakens the groove, or makes the mix unstable. Preserve motion that supports the arrangement, even if it remains subtle. Bypass is the reality check. It turns automation from a drawing exercise into a listening decision. The final lane count does not matter. The contrast between static and expressive does. Here is the complete expression pass. First, isolate one parameter so you understand cause and effect. Second, use filter movement to shape tone and tension. Third, treat the LFO as repeating automation and let its rate or depth follow the song. Fourth, ride level so phrases and sections have direction. Fifth, use CC11, CC1, velocity, and other expression tools according to the instrument's real mapping. Sixth, move selected textures through the stereo field while keeping the center stable. Seventh, build macros that coordinate several safe parameter ranges around one named idea. Eighth, draw curves that follow the phrase instead of accepting every default line. Ninth, change the amount and character of automation between sections. 10th, bypass and subtract until every remaining move contributes. You do not need all 10 techniques on every sound. Apply 3 where they solve a real problem, then listen in the full arrangement. A pad may need a filter arc and slow pan. A string phrase may need velocity, dynamics, and expression. A lead may need one hand-recorded macro and nothing else. Automation in music production is how you perform the arrangement after the notes are written. Make the movement reveal phrasing. Make contrast, create emotion. Let the computer repeat the notes, but give the song a reason to breathe.